Good morning. Today we're going to discuss Chapter 7 in the textbook, and we're going to build a program that covers TypDef and Enum specifically. I always encourage you to read the entire textbook because that's going to help you understand some of the concepts here. In fact, I would suggest you read the textbook before you watch the videos, but if you're watching this video and you haven't read the textbook, then just go back and read the text for Chapter 7 to understand what we're doing here. But we're going to create a C++ file called Chapter 7, and we're gonna keep these videos relatively short, and that's why the textbook is helpful to read through before we do these videos. But right off the bat, we're going to include IOStream because we're going to keep using the console input here on the console. So the IOStream allows us to have input and output, and we're going to use namespace standard. As mentioned before, this allows us to use namespace standard. This allows us to not have to type in std : everywhere. This brings in that namespace so we can just type in cin and cout, etc. The IOStream is a library that brings in input-output support. But let's talk about TypDef. This keyword allows us to give a new name to an existing data type, and that gives us clarity and reduces redundancy. So for example, I can define an int as age for this program, and I'm going to define a double for this program as GPA. Now, once I have those types defined, when I create my main program, I can now use them as a data type. And let me show you that. So now I can say age, student age equals 21, and GPA, student GPA equals 3.05, and I can output now to the console. Let's type this in, TypDef example. Make that have an inline statement. Okay, so what this should output, if I typed everything correctly, is it should output the student age 21, student GPA 3.05. Alright, so let me go ahead and compile this. Oh, I forgot to save it. Always have to save your file. You can now see it's here. It has been saved. Let's compile this now. And once I compile that, I should be able to run this program. And you can see that we have our TypDef example, student age, and student GPA. Now, why is this valuable? Well, it's cleaner when you see this age and the age and GPA as data types. It's cleaner than using int and double, and future readers will understand what these variables represent right away. So when somebody else is looking at your code, they will understand immediately what you're trying to do. Another property we can use is called enum. Enum will define a list of named integer constants, and to go show you an example of that, I can set up an enum here. and we're going to say enum color. You may or may not have seen enums in previous classes. I try to cover it in the first programming class, but it depends on if we get to it or not. Either way, that's a straight enum. By default, the computer assigns keys to this, and then it's going to assign red the key of 0, green the key of 1, and blue the key of 2, right? And we can add this enum to the main function, and to do that I can bring this in. So we're going to say enum example, just like our TypDef example, but an enum. And we will say code index, and we'll come back to this. Gotta spell correctly. Wow. There we go. When I thought about this program in my head, I wasn't thinking about bringing in user input, but we're going to need user input, and so we're going to say we'll do it this way. I won't bring in user input at all. We'll say color I just can't type today. Color favorite color equals assigning green to favorite color. Alright, yeah, that works. Okay, so now we've assigned favorite color as green, and then it's gonna run this program. Alright, for the purposes of testing this, I'm gonna go ahead and comment out these other lines of code. I know in a previous video you've seen me just use functional definitions, and maybe I'll do that in the next video. I was hoping this would be faster. It doesn't feel like it's faster. But either way, let's run this, and you can now see the enum example. Green, which was our first value here, not our zeroth value. It's 0, 1, 2. Green has that index of 1, and of course the favorite color is green because it does equal green. If we were going to put, let's try this. I'm just going to copy down a line of code real quick. Okay, so now we have the red value here, and we'll run the program. Save this. We'll run the program, and of course it still says green because that color is green. But if we make this red, it should do something different. Before close red. Okay, and the index is now 0, and you can see that. Alright, so this makes the code more meaningful than using random numbers because we've given the values to these indices. And so we've created like a key, but we don't have to access it. We can just use the red, green, and blue. Alright. Enums can also use custom values. So instead of using the embedded index, we can use custom values, and I'm going to show you that definition. So I'm going to create an enum for status, and in status we're going to say OK equals 200, not found equals 404, and server error equals 500. And notice all these errors, and that's because I used the wrong brackets. Should fix those errors? Yes. Alright. So let's go ahead and let me bring this bracket here, this end comment, to the end of this. And you know what I also forgot? A return statement. You'll find it interesting that C++ now runs without the return statement, but we need that return statement because we do have a return call here. Alright, so let's go ahead and say status response equals not found. We will put a second inline in here for this particular code segment, and what you will see when I run this code is how this looks now. There's the HTTP response code. Just for fun, just kind of show you what this looks like. Actually, you can see it here. Alright, so because we have defined this response code, it gives us, instead of giving us an index, it gives us that 404. Right? So you can see that 404. Alright. So this technique is helpful when working with predefined standards like HTTP codes or system statuses, or because it allows you to assign those codes to specific like explanations that you're giving it in the enum. So let's kind of put all this together with one big function that is a real-world example. So we have this here, but we are going to comment all of this out, and we are going to create a real-world example. And that real-world example is going to be products. Alright, so I'm going to create a little function that is called, I guess we'll do a product lookup. product lookup. Okay. And of course I'm going to define that function up top, void product lookup. And I'm going to implement that function here below. No parameters being passed in, but I'm going to say our product ID, do this right, our product ID is equal to 5001, and our category real world use case. We'll just bring in the index here for that product category. And yeah. Okay, so obviously we don't have product ID or category defined. So let's kind of define that. So come back up to our TypDef. I'm going to define a new definition. And here we're going to have that product ID. Still didn't fix that because I capitalized the D. So let's go ahead and fix that problem. Alright, so you can see now that's fixed. And the other problem we have has to do with the category, right? And so we're going to make this an enum. Alright, so now we have our enum defined, and so when we say electronics, this should output our product ID as 0. And let's go ahead and run this code. Alright, there you go. Okay, so this TypDef gives clarity to the product ID type, and the enum labels categories instead of using plain numbers. So let's wrap up what we've discussed here. TypDef gives new names to data types for better readability. Enum defines a list of named constants that makes code easier to understand. You can assign custom values to enums. These tools are essential for writing clean, maintainable code. So basically, we're going to use TypDef when you want to use a descriptive reusable type name. You're going to use enum when you're working with a set of known values, like days of the week, systems, states, or categories. Alright, so yeah, just keep working on this, and once again, please read the chapters, and we will see you soon.